Hi, everybody. Welcome to Christian Homestead. My name is Jared. I got an email from Desiree Leathers. Subject line, breaking. Israel just changed Temple Mount policy. And in the email, hello, Jared. Not sure if you had seen this yet, but this just popped up on my recommended. And then she left a link for a video on the Israel Guys YouTube channel. Thank you for the email, Desiree. And as always, I want to go to a credible news source for things like this. And so I did a search, and indeed, it seems that something big did happen. Now, I want to make clear at the very beginning here, I'm a neutral observer when it comes to things having to do with the Jews and them trying to change things on the Temple Mount and preparing for the Third Temple. I don't know how prophecy is going to play out. And as far as the church is concerned, the church is neutral in this conflict between Israel and the Palestinians and contention between them. Okay, so I'm not like being a cheerleader for whatever's happening, and I definitely don't support anything that goes against the law. In this case, it seems like something changed with policy. So this is like an official change. Okay, Times of Israel, a first step, Jewish prayer is returning to the Temple Mount. And then I'm just going to read this first part here. Today, for the first time in 2,000 years, Jews are officially allowed to pray on the Temple Mount with printed pages. The Temple Institute actually posted about this, and I guess this is what it looks like. So this is stunning to me. I've been observing this whole situation very closely with the Temple Mount since I started my channel, August of 2021, and things continue to escalate. There's more and more and more developments like this, and this is wild. I couldn't have pictured this, 4.5 years ago when I started, that there are these cards, these prayer cards that are officially permitted on the Temple Mount. So yeah, this is kind of big news. Okay, full prayer books remain restricted, but even this small acknowledgement is a historic breakthrough after years of political struggle, lobbying, and activism. Now, you'll notice I highlighted for the first time in 2,000 years. I don't know that that's the case. Later on in this very same article, he says, today marks a historic, though still limited victory for the first time in decades. So I don't know whether to go with the first time in 2,000 years or the first time in decades. It's the same article. Israeli police have officially allowed Jewish visitors to bring a single specific printed prayer page prepared and distributed by the Temple Mount Yeshiva onto the site. And then here's a picture of a Jewish woman that has the new prayer card as she's touring the Temple Mount. Let's go to I-24 News. This is in Israel. Historic shift at Temple Mount as Jewish worshipers allowed printed prayers. Okay, Israeli police have, for the first time, okay, so they're saying for the first time, permitted Jewish visitors to enter the Temple Mount carrying printed prayer materials, marking a notable shift in the management of one of Jerusalem's most sensitive religious sites. According to multiple reports, Jewish worshipers were handed liturgical leaflets. So it's not like, from what I gather, it's not like that this is happening. You go to the Temple Mount Yeshiva and request one. It seems like they're actively giving them out to people that are ascending the Temple Mount. So according to multiple reports, Jewish worshipers were handed liturgical leaflets on Wednesday morning ahead of their ascent to the compound. Later on, police have not issued an official statement on the change. Beyadenu, an organization advocating for Jewish prayer rights on the Temple Mount, said that for now, only a specific brochure produced by a Temple Mount affiliated yeshiva has been approved, though the policy could evolve further. So yeah, we've seen Beyadenu before on the channel. They're an activist group. Beyadenu described the introduction of printed prayers as a significant step. And you guys, from my perspective, for what it's worth, I don't think that's an understatement. It truly is. It's kind of unbelievable. And later on in the video, we're going to talk about a conversation that I had with Grok about all these like little steps and all these little things that are changing uh, what's called the status quo on the Temple Mount, which could be leading to something bigger. And I don't know if that's going to be the temple or if that's going to lead to war in Armageddon. So that's why I'm so interested in this. Again, not that I support all these things that are going on, but I'm watching it as a neutral observer and thinking about it in the context of prophecy and where this could lead. Either the temple, potentially, or to the final war in the siege of Jerusalem. I don't know, but it feels like it's going somewhere. Okay, quote from Beadenu. This is something the police once enforced with extreme strictness, a spokesperson said, noting that possession of liturgical text previously resulted in immediate expulsion. Okay, and then we have the Jerusalem Post is also talking about this. This is relatively big. Well, it is big news for the Temple Mount. Israel police loosened Temple Mount prayer restrictions for Jewish visitors. Israeli police have allowed Jewish visitors to bring prayer pages onto the Temple Mount in Jerusalem for the first time in years. Okay, so here again, I'm trying to figure out, is it the first time in 2,000 years? Is it the first time in decades? Is it the first time? I don't know. But Jerusalem Post says for the first time in years. So I guess maybe a while ago they were allowed to do this. I have no idea. A significant departure from the long-established status quo governing the highly sensitive religious site. Under the new policy, Jewish visitors may enter the site with a single prayer page, but only if it is prepared in advance and distributed at the entrance by the Temple Mount Yeshiva. Visitors are still barred from bringing personal prayer books, phylacteries, and other religious items. Okay, well, before we continue with this article, like I said, there's been a lot of developments lately. This is a Temple Institute post from December 23rd of 2025. And you can see people have these prayer books. Here's a Jewish man that has phylacteries on. Phylacteries is the English word. In Hebrew, it's tefillin. And so, I mean, here he is. He's on top of the Temple Mount. I don't know that this was officially permitted, but I don't see anything that shows that he got arrested or anything else. And they also had this. You have this guy wearing his talit gadol, this shawl, this prayer shawl right here. And then they lit candles for Hanukkah on the Temple Mount. So this was a recent development. Also, over like the last year, maybe two, but I think just within the last year, we've seen more of this where they're starting to do full body prostrations and praying in this manner. Here's a guy that had a shofar or a ram's horn on the Temple Mount, and he sounded it, according to this, for the first time in 2,000 years. So he's the first one to do it in 2,000 years. And then you have activist groups. I'm not sure exactly who did this, but they've started to put up these signs along roadways pointing to the temple. So these brown signs right here, where it says Har Beit Hashem, with a picture that looks like the temple, those aren't official. This was put up by activist groups. I don't know if they've been taken down. And then here you have Israeli police themselves praying on the Temple Mount with the guy over here on his knees. And then you have this. Here's a child that's dressed up like the Kohen Gadol or the high priest. This was back in 2023. And then you have an actual priest, a Kohen, So this is someone that's descended from Aaron, the brother of Moses. They've kept track of those bloodlines. And here he is in his temple clothes up on the Temple Mount. And I was shocked by this when I first saw this. This is October 13th of 2024. This right here was pretty daring. And I'm surprised that it happened, but I guess not, because I think things changed after the war started in 2023. It seems like a lot of these developments came after that time. There's like a momentum, it seems. So here he is. Doing like a priestly blessing. That's the way that they do it with their hands like that. This is actually where on Star Trek, the live long and prosper peace sign, it comes from this. The guy that played Leonard Nimoy, the guy that plays Spock, he's Jewish, and he's the one that suggested using this sign for the Vulcans. But yeah, doing a priestly blessing. And then I don't know if this is the same priest, but let's see, when was this? June 2nd of last year. There was a Cohen up there, along with another guy that were trying to perform the Pentecost or Shavuot sacrifice of 2 loaves of bread. And with this one, this video shows the police going after them, so they tried to do it. But you can see that things are really ramping up. And so now, I mean, it's surprising, but I guess it's not surprising that now they're permitting these prayer cards on the Temple Mount. Okay. The approved page includes visitor instructions as well as the Amidah, a central prayer said 3 times daily. The decision comes just 2 weeks after Major General Avshalom Peled took office as commander of the Jerusalem district of the Israel Police. Peled is considered close to National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir. And we've seen him before. I mean, if you know anything about Israel and you follow Israeli news, he's kind of a important figure. He's viewed as very controversial, belligerent, very far right, and he wants to change everything. He does not care at all about. It seems he doesn't care at all about starting war or doing whatever it takes to, do things like this. Okay, so a far right politician who has openly called for expanded Jewish prayer rights at the compound. And then the article talks about prohibiting prayer, singing, or ritual gestures, which I just showed you all those pictures. The delicate status quo governing the Temple Mount goes back to 1967 when Israel liberated Jerusalem's old city from Jordan during the 6-Day War. Which, by the way, I definitely feel like that was prophetic, because when we're talking about the times of the Gentiles, there's kind of 2 parts to that prophecy. One has to do with the restored gospel going first to the Gentiles and then to the Jews. In the last dispensation, Christ's dispensation, it went first to the Jews and then the Gentiles. So in the last dispensation, it's reversed. But then also, in regards to the physical land and the city of Jerusalem, it was to be trodden under the foot of Gentiles, and then given back to the Jews. So like the time of the Gentiles where they possess the city comes to an end, and then it goes back to the Jews. And I think that the 6-Day War may have fulfilled that part of it. And I guess maybe it's still being fulfilled, especially as the Jews are trying to assert more and more control, especially over the Temple Mount. And then in this paragraph, it says, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu insists that Jewish prayer is not officially permitted at the site. However, the police who are responsible for enforcing the ban fall under Ben-Gvir's purview. Ben-Gvir has advocated Jewish worship at the holy site for years. He openly led Jewish prayers at the site in August during Tisha B'Av a holiday marking the anniversary of the destruction of both the first and second temples. Yeah, I think he's been to the Temple Mount a couple times, and it's stirred up anger and contention, but he does not care. Okay, so I've added this to my spreadsheet called Judaism Signs. Um, these are things that I believe certain Jews would view as signs, primarily Orthodox Jews. I think about my friend Adam Eliyahu Berkowitz, who's a journalist with Israel 365, and we're very much on the same page when it comes to things that they would consider signs. We had a big conversation about it in an interview that I did with him. Just go to my playlist called Special Guests, and you can find that. It's the most, I think it's the most recent conversation I had with him. But so this particular event, I'm putting it under activism in column H. It seems that, yes, the Israeli police have officially permitted this, but it wouldn't even be a thing if there weren't activists that were pushing for it. So this is the newest development. It's the first one that I know of for 2026, and it makes me wonder what else is going to happen this year. We saw a plethora of things in 2025. I mean, look at this, going down to row 16, from row 16 all the way up to row 3. These are all, well, most of these are things that have to do with the Temple Mount. Not all of them, but yeah, it's like picking up steam. That's the way that I view it. And then I have another spreadsheet. This one is called Judaism Temple Preparation. I'm not putting this story on here because I don't believe it's necessarily preparing for the third temple per se, at least not in a direct way. But there's been a lot of activity by these activist groups to prepare for the third temple. I have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 events in 2025. Looks like I have 5 for 2024. And again, who knows what we'll see this year. But they're serious. There's a faction of them that are serious. Not every single Jew. In fact, there are Jews that are against all of this. They're against ascending the Temple Mount because there's certain rabbis that think, well, we don't know exactly where everything was at, and you're not permitted to go into certain areas of the temple. Even if the temple is not there, you can't go there. So it's better just not to go up to the Temple Mount. And then you have certain, it seems like they're mostly Hasidic Jews, Jews that belong to these different dynasties that are against Zionism. They don't think that Jews should have created the state of Israel, that's the work of Messiah. And so they're like actively against Israel. And they join protests along with like Palestinians or Palestinian supporters because they think that all of this is blasphemy, that you should wait till Messiah comes and then he's the one that paves the way. And so this is like a abomination, what's going on. So in Judaism, there's a wide spectrum of beliefs ranging from, secular Jews that don't even think any of this matters to those that like insist that Messiah has to do it. And then those that are in between, people like my friend Adam Eliyahu Berkowitz, who is an Orthodox Jew in Israel. And then finally, I want to read this conversation with Grok. I had a previous conversation, but I asked it to kind of repeat what we had talked about last time because I couldn't find, I may have deleted it. I don't know. But Grok says, in our previous conversation, I described the approach of certain Jewish activist groups, often referred to as Temple Mount activists or Third Temple proponents, as favoring a strategy of small, incremental, or gradual changes, rather than sudden, dramatic actions to alter the status quo on the Temple Mount. The core idea I conveyed was that these groups, such as organizations linked to the Temple Institute, Beyadenu, the Temple Mount Heritage Foundation, and others, focus on steadily increasing Jewish access, presence, and permitted activities on the site over time. This includes pushing for more Jewish visitors, more frequent ascents, tolerance of quiet or discreet prayer, even if officially prohibited, which it looks like that's changed just within the last couple days. Educational efforts to raise temple awareness and symbolic preparations like training guides, producing ritual items, or advocating for policy tweaks. The long-term vision for many remains the eventual rebuilding of a third temple, but they recognize that direct confrontation or immediate construction isn't feasible due to political, security, religious, and international sensitivities. Instead, the emphasis is on preparing the hearts, quote unquote, through public opinion shifts, legal/advocacy work, and chipping away at restrictions step by step, creating facts on the ground, quote unquote, through persistence. The gradualism has been noted in various reports and analyses over the years. Activists train tour guides, which I didn't know that. That's news to me. Publish materials for visitors, organize larger groups for ascents, and lobby for eased enforcement of prayer bans, all while framing demands in terms of religious freedom and equal rights. Some sources describe it as a quote unquote dilution of longstanding status quo where non Muslims visit but do not pray, with the site administered by the Waqf, achieved quietly and incrementally to avoid major escalations. And then later on, I remember in that previous conversation, Grok had said that there were some that believe that this will lead to a synagogue being built on the Temple Mount. And so I asked about that. And it said, yes, I do recall mentioning that in the context of the gradual incremental strategy pursued by some Temple Mount activists and proponents of greater Jewish rights there, including those with an eye toward eventual Third Temple preparations. The idea ties directly into the small steps approach. As Jewish presence, visits, quiet prayer, and other expressions of Jewish practice become more normalized and tolerated over time through repeated ascents, policy tweaks like allowing printed prayer pages, because I gave it a link after this to consider, overlooked prostrations, or louder/visible prayers. Some voices within the movement advocate that the next logical phase could involve establishing a permanent Jewish prayer structure, specifically a synagogue on the Temple Mount. This would serve as a physical symbol of equality, Jews praying in a building akin to Muslims in mosques like Al-Aqsa or the Dome of the Rock, provide shelter for prayer, especially in bad weather, and further entrench Jewish religious activity on the site without immediately jumping to full temple construction. And then it has some bullet points, and I just want to read the last one. Analyses from think tanks and observers note this is a potential escalation step. Once open prayer is routine, which I don't know, it looks like that's officially what's happening now, if they're allowing prayer cards. So once open prayer is routine, demands shift to protected/structured prayer spaces, which could shorten the path to broader changes, including symbolic or preparatory steps toward a temple. So, this is kind of crazy. I'm very, very curious to see what's going to happen this year. We're only at the very beginning, and it's impossible for me to imagine that nothing else is going to happen, right? Because you can see a trend. All these things that I just showed you, they didn't all happen in just one day. I mean, they did happen in a very short period of time, but not just in one day. And so if you have a trend like this, it probably isn't just going to die off all of a sudden. So I think it's reasonable to expect that we're going to have more stories throughout this year. But the question is, already having come this far, like, what's the next level? What's the next escalation? What's the next whatever? It almost feels like you're kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel before, doing just what we just read, having a synagogue built on the Temple Mount. Like what else is there to chip away at before you get to that point? So it's kind of a big question on my mind. I guess before that, before like a synagogue, maybe there would be like certain spaces that would be reserved for Jews to observe holy days, so it's like, okay, on Rosh Hashanah, this area over here, this quadrant or this, whatever, this is going to be reserved on Rosh Hashanah every year. This is going to be reserved for the Feast of Tabernacles every year. Maybe that would come before actually building a mosque. Um, and I have to wonder, like, what kind of resistance there would be going forward, because we've had this war where Hamas has essentially been decimated. Um, Hezbollah, I don't know their strength right now. I know that there's been some back and forth, well, mostly just from Israel against Hezbollah. And then Iran is not looking good right now. So I feel like that's probably pretty emboldening for the Jewish side. And before the war, we were pretty used to seeing these like clashes on the Temple Mount. In fact, it seems like that final clash, I think it was during Ramadan of 2023. It seems like that was one of the straws that broke the camel's back that led to the war that started later that year. But since that time, I'm not aware of any other like clashes on the Temple Mount. These crazy things where you have Israeli police up there, and some of the more recent developments is more frequent intrusion, or however you want to phrase it, of the police into Al-Aqsa Mosque to arrest people, to put the violence down. But we haven't really seen that since the war. And I almost wonder if we'll ever see that again, because in a sense, it's like Israel's kind of won the war. I don't know if the other side is demoralized. I don't know, but I just have so many questions about what's going to happen going forward, but we'll just have to wait and see. Okay, well, that's going to be it for this one. I'll talk to you guys later.